Today I'm going to start a batch of Booyah, which is actually, I guess you could call it a hearty soup or a stew. It pretty much has, can have beef, chicken, turkey, pork, all kinds of meat in it. But traditionally, I think it's usually, well, in Minnesota, I've seen recipes where they basically cook it up using whole chickens, whole turkeys, and beef bones. And some Wisconsin recipes, I think it's just basically been beef bones and chicken. Can add some other things, but to start this out, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just what I had in my freezer that I need to get rid of. So I basically have some pork. Really don't need to get rid of it, but I'm going to use it. I'm going to cut it up into strips and refreeze it so I can start making sausage with it. I'm going to have some turkey breast. I have a small whole chicken I'm going to put in it. I have some cubed beef. But essentially, all these are going to go into it, and then I'm going to put it. It's going into the pressure cooker, and then from the pressure cooker, I'm going to heat it up to 15 pounds of pressure, or 10 to 15 pounds of pressure. Leave it at that for maybe, 10 to 15 minutes. Just turn it off and let it, cool off on its own. At that time, then I'm going to take the whole works, the pressure cooker, and put it outside. And being in Minnesota, I can take advantage of the weather conditions being colder to cool off the soup. And then I can leave it for a while outside, and it might even freeze if I leave it too long. But the whole point of doing that is basically, one, I got to be able to take and pick through all the meat. Like, obviously the chicken's going to have bones in it, and I got to pick them out. Well, and then I forgot there's one other thing that I'm actually going to add to it, or maybe a few other things. But I do bone out chickens from time to time, and basically what I do is I save the bones in the freezer until an occasion like this, or making maybe chicken noodle soup, or I'm just going to use them up in this. But like I say, I just save them from boning out chickens, and that's actually going to give it more flavor than more hardiness and flavor than it would normally have without it. So all I'm going to do at this time is just start putting the stuff into the pot. I'm going to add maybe a gallon or so, a half gallon of water. Put it on the stove, start to pressure cook it. So anyway, essentially this probably will look like a lot in the pot when you're starting out, but as I say, you're just putting the bones in there pretty much to start the stock, or to get the flavor out for the base, and for the stock. And then basically you'll just take all the bones out and dispose of them, or do what you want with them. But I think with this pork, I'm probably just going to add maybe I'm guessing it's probably a little less than a pound, about 3/4 pound. I'll big deal, just cut it up. So, last thing I did have in the container was a couple chicken breasts I'm going to throw in there. So essentially I got all this in there, and I, you know, like I say, I washed out the egg and the blood. Obviously everything that's it's just gonna cook down anyway, so add whatever this is for water. Obviously I don't want to fill it up, it's a pressure cooker, and I may have added too much water, but probably isn't gonna hurt. So then from there, you can see I'm going to, I don't know, there's probably a lot of different ways to actually do this on the pressure cooker, and I know this cover sometimes is difficult to get on properly, but there it is. Probably put it on the stove on high, you know, get it up to temperature, then, you know what, then I will put the, I don't know what you call the, you know, the stopper on there to, you know, hold the pressure, which goes on here. And like I said, you know, once it's hot, I'll let it get up to probably about 15 pounds of pressure, and then, you know, turn the heat way down, and then possibly off, you know, but you really only need to give, like I say, 10, 15, 20 minutes probably, you know, cooking time before you take it off the heat, or just turn off the heat and then let it cool off on its own. So I basically won't have that obviously on video, but I'm going to or I maybe have it on video, but I'm just have to, you know, rearrange the camera. But now I'm going to put it on the stove and just get everything going. The pressure cooker is getting up to pressure. I can use the infrared temperature sensor to see that the pot is about 158.9 degrees right now. But obviously, as you can possibly see, you know, it is letting off some steam. Once the thing is fully pressurized, you know, most of the steam should not be coming out the side of the pot anymore. And it should be dripping any water, but it isn't quite to pressure yet. So based on what you can see on the scale, once we get it hot enough, probably get it up to about 15 pounds of pressure before we're basically turning down the heat. But you know, with the pressure cooker, it's obviously something you have to be around to watch. It's not something you can basically set and forget, you know, because obviously a pressure cooker has, and, you know, can be used as a bomb. So essentially, if you don't have time to be, you know, while around monitoring the pressure cooker to make sure that you can see when it comes up to pressure, then you probably should only be doing this when you have time. So, but yeah, as you can see, temperatures are rising pretty quickly. The burner is actually on the highest setting right now, so you know, once it starts to build pressure, it'll probably do it quite quickly. And you know, once it gets to around, I don't know, maybe 7 to 10 pounds, I'll start to cut back on the heat. And if I need to, I'll slide it off of the burner itself onto a cooler part. But usually if you watch it and you just basically, you know, turn down the heat as you go, you can usually get it to 15 pounds without having it go over. But like I say, you just have to be around to watch and monitor it with these old style pressure cookers. So like I said, once the pressure increases in the pot, usually the seals and stuff like that will seal up the size of the pot, so obviously it's not leaking pressure out the outside of the pot, and at that point it should mostly be coming out of the pressure release there. And this one's actually old, and you can just basically pull it right off of there. It's just basically on there by weight. So if I wanted to, I could actually lift it up or whatever. But obviously, as you have to do that with gloves on or something else, because obviously it's just going to be hot steam coming off there, and probably no reason really to do that. But like I say, it can be done. So right now we're looking at getting close to 10 pounds of pressure. So as it gets to probably about 10 pounds, I'm going to maybe cut back on the heat a little bit. Okay, so that's about at 10 pounds. So on this stove, it actually has it's obviously an older stove, but it has a single burner in the middle, and then a double burner if you turn on that way. So essentially, what I'm going to do is leave it on the double boiler side and just turn it down to about half of the temperature. But you can obviously see the temperature is rising quite quickly, so I may just turn it almost low. I suppose in normal canning, you probably wouldn't traditionally want to have it, the pressure that high, and I think that's what I'm going to do with the Booyah is basically when it's all done, I'm not going to cook it like traditionally is done, which you need a large pot to do. I'm just going to can everything. So essentially, once we get to that point, I'll be canning the Booyah, but going through the obvious steps to also you can just cook it. But obviously, if you just cook it and don't utilize a pressure cooker or anything like that, obviously it takes hours to get done, which is that's what they usually do with Booyah, I guess, is it take it's just cooking it for a long time. It's just basically with a pressure cooker you're speeding up the process quite a bit, but there's really probably no difference between making it with a pressure cooker and cooking it out over in a large kettle. So, and obviously, not going to be able to feed, 100 or, say 25 to 50 people. So, I'll just be, eating most of it myself. So basically, I'm just, canning it is the best way. So I turned up the heat a little bit because I just want to get to that 15-pound point. And once you get to 15 pounds, all we want to do is maybe hold it at that temperature for, possibly do it for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then possibly longer, but then, basically just turn off the heat altogether and just let it sit off and cool off by itself, because with some pressure cookers I probably wouldn't need to do that, because they would hold the pressure a lot better than with this style of petcock. But I guess that it works out the same. It's just, as you can see, it's almost, you only need to get a maybe about 3 pounds more pressure before it hits 15 pounds. So at this point, I'm pretty much just trying to determine how much heat it is going to take to actually achieve 15 pounds of pressure. So I've been actually increasing the heat slowly, but at some time, once I get to 15 pounds, I may have to, start to decrease it again. But once you get it to 15 pounds, you really don't, obviously you don't want to, you haven't started getting into the danger zone right away because, it's heating up too fast or getting pressure too fast. But that's why, like I say, that's why you want to be around watching this while it's doing it. Otherwise, it could get dangerous. Okay, so it looks like it's at about 15 pounds of pressure. I'll try to decrease the heat to keep it at like 15 pounds of pressure for maybe, like I say, 5 to 10 minutes before shutting it down. I left the pressure cooker outside in the entryway for a day. And being it's in Minnesota, it's pretty much about 30 to 35 degrees in the entryway. I guess probably say that it's above 32 degrees because this, if it was any colder, this would have froze. But anyway, it's kind of good practice to do that because obviously the faster you cool off something, the less chance of growing, pathogens in it or bacteria. And then I got to be able to, rather than being hot, I got to be able to handle the meat and tear it off the bones for the chicken. What's not boneless in here. And the third thing I got to be able to do is I got to skim off all the fat. Because when you can it, you usually don't want a lot of fat in there. So that's pretty much what I'm going to do. I'm going to skim off the fat. I might just let the pot warm up a little bit before I start to work with the meat because obviously if it's 30 degrees, sometimes your hands get cold awful fast. And then I'll probably separate the meat from the rest of the stock, and then I'm going to cut up the vegetables, add more water to this, to the stock, and then I'll start the canning process. So at this point, I'm just going to basically just finish skimming off the fat, let the pot warm up so I can work with the meat, and then I'll be back. I removed some of the fat from the stock, and then I've separated all the meat. So what I'm doing now is actually I have a few bowls. I've already picked through some of the stuff, but I gotta still debone the chicken and go through the rest of the stuff, just saving a separate bowl of stuff. And then I have stuff that's been picked through, which I'll probably just I'll cut up a little bit more, and then I may not add it back into the stock until I cut up and put all the vegetables in it. So that's pretty much all I'm doing right now. Is I'm going to finish going through all the meat and making sure if there's anything that's meat, throwing it into the meat bowl, taking the, separating the cleaned off bones, do another pot. So don't know about everybody else, but I don't worry about the skin. I'm just going to put everything in there and, just try to keep as many bones out of it as I can, but it may never be perfect because you're dealing with bones and sometimes they're just hard to find. But anyway, for now I'm basically just finishing up boning out the rest of the meat, and then from there I'll be back later. Okay, so what I've done so far is basically this is a day away from when I started on the soup. I basically pressure cooked the meat. I deboned all the meat. I separated, so I basically have the meat in a bowl, which I'm going to cut up. And then basically have the rest of the vegetables. I'm going to put celery. I'm going to put some garlic in there. I may put a bit of corn in there. Green beans. These are golden potatoes. A little bit of onions. Some carrots. I guess these carrots don't look the best, but part of the point of making soup or booyah is basically for me is to get rid of everything that maybe getting a little bit old. Obviously, when you put it in soup and you peel it and put it in soup, you're really not going to notice if it's old or new or whatever. And one of the special ingredients, so rutabaga, however you want to pronounce it. And I guess I just need these are a little bit wilted. They're just basically small vine ripened tomatoes. I'm just going to toss a few of them in there to get rid of them. Already pre-prepped and put some cabbage in the soup. So I'm probably only going to put a small amount of this head into the soup. As I mentioned, I got the meat, which I'll probably dice up last after I cut up all the vegetables. And then I stewed some tomatoes, or basically cooked them and peeled the skin off. I'm going to use a few more of them, but I already also put some of them into the soup. So I'm only going to dice up a few more of these to put in the soup. So essentially, I've just been going through that process of cutting up everything and getting it ready. And in proportional amounts basically fit into, I guess I don't know exactly, I think it's, I'd probably get 3.5 gallons of volume, in the pressure cooker. And then from there, I'll mix it up, season it up, and then start to put it in jars for canning. Like I say, even if I don't cook any of the vegetables, and go through the process of cooking everything in certain times, because say like the rutabaga or the cabbage, you may want to cook longer than the potatoes because they don't, or the carrots because they don't take that long to cook. So if you're actually making booyah outside on an open flame or something like that, you may just be cooking certain things before others. But in the end, booyah actually is really a hearty soup stew. But a lot of the vegetables were actually kind of broken down. So if you have potatoes in there and you dice them up, from stirring it and cooking it and so forth and so on, they're not going to be a lot of whole pieces of potato in there possibly because, like I say, they'll be cooked down. They're there, but, they're more like a lot of mashed potatoes in the soup. So, if you wanted to actually do this, in theory, I'd have everything as far as the ingredients and the pressure cooked stock with everything in there. You could actually, cook it over an open fire if you wanted to, if you had actually a large enough stock pot to do it in, and take several hours more to do it. But the one thing that actually pressure cooking will do is basically cook everything, allow it to be more firm and whole. And okay, got the rutabaga peeled and ready to cut up. So for the soup, I'm just gonna essentially cut it into slices like this, and then I'm gonna cut it the long way and kind of a smaller dice, probably be smaller than my potatoes, but essentially it's diced up something like that, so you know it goes all through the soup, or you know goes a little bit further in the soup. But already got the carrots and celery already in the pot ready to go, and so I'm just going to continue working through the stuff. When I get to the potatoes, these are, like I say, these are golden, yellow golden potatoes, and you can see the skin is kind of clean. So unless there's anything really bad with the potato, I'm going to probably just dice these up as they are and not going to peel them or anything like that. So do that, and then all I got left is the onion and the cabbage, and I might just cut up a little bit of the cabbage, and I'm going to, you know, maybe cut it more like a shred rather than dice. So I will finish dicing up the rutabaga, cut up the onion, cut up the potatoes. I will get to take a few of those tomatoes and dice, you know, some of them up to put in there, and then finally I'll just basically go through the meat and kind of dice or chop that up a little bit, because like I say, if I don't cook it anymore, and you know don't stir it up a lot, you know the meat's not going to break down that much more, you know, before putting it in the cans. So or I'm sorry, not the cans but the jars. So anyway, okay, I diced up all the vegetables. I have the celery, carrots, onions, potatoes, and cabbage in a small stock pot, you know, full of water, obviously, to just keep everything, you know, wash it, and then keep the stuff like the potatoes and the rutabaga from turning brown. I'll essentially just drain that off and then pour it into the stock pot that I removed the meat from. I will dice up a few stewed tomatoes. I will cut these up to get rid of them. I will dice up the meat and throw that into the stock pot. Decide how much of the, you know, the canned or prepackaged stuff I'm going to throw in there, the green beans and carrots, but I may just throw everything that I have in there. Add a little garlic, and then start to heat it up maybe a little bit just to get it hot, and then I will season it, and then, you know, it'll be ready for canning. Okay, nearing the end of the prep, we're getting everything ready to finish off the soup or can it. So I'm just dicing up the meat. Nothing too spectacular. You can see a lot of the chicken, maybe the turkey, sometimes just, you know, even after 15 minutes in the pressure cooker, tends to fall apart and get really stringy. And if you ever ate Booyah with actually chicken in it, you'd see that basically there's just a lot of stringy meat in the soup. Like in the canning, it may stay, you know, some of the stuff that's actually whole, diced, may stay together a little bit better. So like I say, I won't really do a lot of cooking or processing of it before it goes into the can. So, or I'm sorry, the jar. So once it's in the jar, basically, it, you know, pretty much is just undisturbed, and will not be disturbed until actually you pour it out, you know, from the jar to eat. So I guess I put a lot of meat and bones into the stock to start with, to you know, basically give it a, you know, a real good flavor. So obviously the bones are thrown away, but you know, when you put like turkey necks and then chicken bones into the stock, it actually you know, provides a lot of flavor, and that's pretty much how they make chicken stock or chicken soup, is to either boil the bones or you know, boil the whole chicken, but then, you know, bone it out, so forth, so on, to there's a lot of flavor in that. So anyway, I'm done with this. I have, I'll show you in a bit here, but I switched out to a bigger pot for the soup because the pressure cooker, if I have that available, I only have one that I can use right now, but if I have that available, I can start putting the jars in there after I get, directly from the pot as I portion it out. So I'll get to that in a bit. Okay, this is a bigger pot. I actually transferred everything into this pot. I've added more liquid to it. I've added the meat. I've added the vegetables that I cut up. I'm pretty much, to the final parts where I am going to add 2 cans of corn for this, and I'm going to add a couple things of green beans just to give it some, more volume. And then I have a little bit of garlic that I'm just going to basically pour in there. And then I'm going to start working on the seasoning. So I'll just be doing that. Okay, corn and green beans. I kind of drained off the liquid from the container, but didn't do anything else. Just pretty much drained off the juice. Garlic. I usually buy this at the dollar store. I don't know what you have in your location, but usually I can get jars of this for $1. So I don't bother with cutting up garlic or doing any of that kind of stuff because it's just too resource intensive. And I don't know if there's any huge difference between that fresh garlic and garlic in a jar, except the amount of time you actually take cutting it up and so forth. So I don't know if you can get a good view of what this actually looks like when everything's added to it. But you can see it's really dense, has a lot of vegetables and stuff in it. And so when I can it, I'll try to divide that up between all the jars, but probably won't add any more liquid to what I have and leave it like this. And start to season it. The most basic thing would be obviously salt. When you use salt for cooking, you usually want to use non-iodized salt. And the other stuff you can actually add to it is, like I say, tomato or oregano and basil, which actually would give it kind of a, that's what you usually traditionally use in minestrone and stuff like that. Really don't have to add a lot of stuff to it. I know I have friends that actually can't, eat a lot of salt or, can't eat certain other things, but all I want to do is, for me, a little bit of salt actually brings out the flavor. But you don't want to add too much salt. I mean, you can have it perfect, but I don't know. I've done it before and basically added maybe a little bit too much salt. And if you like to eat it with crackers and stuff like that, obviously the salt in the crackers can make it a little bit overbearing. But you see what I kind of added. can see how dense it is. And I'm pretty much at the point where I may just add a little bit of oregano and basil to it. But that's it. Really isn't, I don't know if, I've looked for Booyah recipes online but never really seen anything. I've tasted it because actually they have a Booyah festival in my local town. But, you know, like I say, that's basically Booyah where you cook it all day and stuff like that. And there's really not, I mean, the vegetables are there, but you can't see them because usually they're really cooked till there's nothing left of them. So, I assume this basically is, you know, more or less like Booyah. I think the whole point is, I think it's pretty much just, you know, obviously back in the day, you just had stuff you needed to get rid of, and so basically Booyah was actually a way to utilize a lot of things you had. So for me, actually, I just like the flavor, you know, so I actually add what I can for meat, what I can for bones, and you know, that actually gives a real good flavor. If you don't have meat and bones, you can always substitute by just using regular chicken stock along with, you know, your meat and bones when you cook them. But since I don't, you know, I add enough bones and stuff like that to add as additional, you know, flavor for the stock, I didn't use any regular chicken stock. So last step from here is, like I say, I may add a little bit of basil and oregano. As it's heating up, I'll let it heat up, maybe get warm, but not really hot, so it's hard to deal with. And then I'll just basically be on to the canning process, and I think that it'll probably be about 3.5 to 4 gallons of soup in jars, and each jar I'll use is a quart jar or a, you know, actually a quart wide mouth or a regular standard jar. And so, you know, obviously in jars, you know, there's 4 quarts to a gallon, so basically I'll have about 12 to 15 jars of soup after I'm done. Some may not seal properly, and I'll just put them in the refrigerator and eat them right away, because obviously I can't say that I'm an expert on canning, but I can do it. But, you know, sometimes, you know, the jars don't seal up, but, you know, that probably happens for everybody. So anyway, I'll just get back to you when I'm going to be starting the canning process, which should not be too long from now. Okay, I'm going to start on the final steps of you know, canning the soup. So I'm basically going to put the you know, portion the Booyah into the jars. I'm going to put the lids and the rings on the jars, put them into the pressure cooker, and then, you know, in the pressure cooker I'm going to put the, you know, on the stove and get it up to pressure about 10 to 12 pounds for like 90 minutes. And then, you know, basically everything should be ready to go. All you have to do then is take them out and let them cool off. If they don't seal, you should be able to know, and we'll go through that later. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going through this. There's basically 2 types of jars that you can actually use, or probably more than that. But obviously, you know, the normal jars for quarts is this is a standard or regular size jar, narrow mouth jar, which I'm going to try to use them up. So that I got lids and rings for them. So they'll go, you know, obviously the lid and the ring will go on there, and you'll want to tighten it down as tight as you can get it before putting it into the pressure cooker. This is actually just a wide mouth jar, and, you know, you have wide mouth lids and rings, but I'm going to try to save these and not use any of them, because I'm going to use I only have a few left, to be honest, and everything else is in jars, you know, or I've canned a lot of stuff with them. But I do want to use some of these for canning some tomatoes that the leftover tomatoes. And just because they're, you know, a wide mouth jar, it's easier to put a tomato in there that's whole, rather than trying to stuff it into the smaller ones. So that's what I'm going to use them for. But essentially, I'm going to start going through this. All we're going to do is basically have, I don't know what you call these, but, you know, essentially I have 2 types. Stainless steel one that, you know, just fits inside the jar. It'll probably fit inside of almost any jar. And then there's a plastic one which, probably fit a lot of types of jars too. But, like I say, it's plastic and just a little bit different design. Because I have the stainless steel one, I usually use that, just because of the stainless steel. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put this on there, and I'm going to kind of clean a little bit of the work area off. And then move the pot, obviously as close as I can so that I'm not spilling anything along the way, but what I'm doing is just basically just trying to get basically, soup out of the pot, and not, just liquid, and not just vegetables, but obviously, both kind of mixed up good. And what I'm going to do is, be honest, it's probably a little full, so I'm going to just basically just put some back in the pot. But you can see it's pretty dense. A lot of vegetables, a lot of meat, a lot of other stuff in there. But hopefully this is the way that most of the jar is going to be. So in order to finish them off, I'm going to, in this case, I'm just using paper towel, and cleaning off the top as good as I can. And I'll put a lid on there, and I'll put a ring on there. Obviously not all my rings look, real good. Some have some corrosion on there, but it's really not going to, affect anything as far as canning goes. So that's actually what the final product should look like before I put it into the pressure cooker. Like I say, you can see it's really a dense, I guess I would, call it Booyah, but I did actually add, you can see the specks of spice in there, which is actually oregano. And I put basil in there to, give it that kind of flavor. Not that that's in traditional Booyah, but I guess, it's like, well, it's in my version. So anyway, I'm going to put this in the pot. And I think that actually this holds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably hold about 7 jars total. And then at that point, what I'll do is I'll add a little bit of water to the bottom, put the cover on, put it on the stove, get it up to 10 to 12 pounds of pressure, and then at that point you basically start counting down time. And like I said, it has to be for 90 minutes under pressure on the stove. And in theory, if you ever go below 12 pounds or whatever it's supposed to be, 10 pounds. You should start over as far as your time goes, but I usually just try to, if it's supposed to be 10 pounds, I usually go in with 12 pounds. That's obviously not going to hurt anything as far as, the soup goes, because it can only cook so far before it's done. But, obviously it's, when you're pressure canning, you want to make sure that they seal right. And, you kill all the pathogens within the stuff as you go. So essentially, I guess the one thing I didn't mention is, as far as what I was mentioning, pathogens and stuff like that. Obviously, the jars were all cleaned up real good. The lids and rings are all new. You never want to use a used one, because you don't know if it's not going to seal or become unsealed down the road, and obviously you get real sick, botulism and so forth and so on from things like even soup. So I did wash, like I say, I did wash the lids and rings, because even a new lid or ring can have a slight oil film on it from the manufacturing process. So it doesn't hurt to wash them. If you're actually doing a water bath or something like that, you may want to try to sanitize them, or get them boil them in boiling water to try to get them as bacteria free as you can. But since it's pressure canning, the pressure process is actually, like I say, it'll hopefully kill most of the pathogens in the product before it actually comes out of the canner. So from there, I'm just basically going to start filling up the jars. I'm going to start my first batch, which hopefully should be, like I say, depending on the size of the jars and what you can fit in there, but usually it's probably 6 to 7 jars, and so that equals about well, it'd actually be about 1.75 gallons with 7 jars. 6 jars would be 1.5 gallons, because each jar is a quart, and 4 quarts in a gallon. So I'm just going to finish out getting all the jars ready, and then I'm going to put it on the stove. I'll be back then. Okay, I got the last jar ready to go in the canner. There was one thing I didn't mention, was usually they have something about head space, or about how much air, or how far the jar is full to, and how much air is on the top. So essentially, you should have. I have it basically up to probably about this ridge here, which may be a little full, a little too little. I don't know, but I usually just basically probably give it, fill it to about 1/2 inch from the top of the jar. Lid and the ring on it. Tighten it down reasonably tight. I have 7 jars in here. I'm going to just put some tap water in here. Now, some people might put vinegar and so forth into the tap water to keep the lime buildup from getting on the jars while it's pressure cooking. But I'm not worried about that. Sometimes I don't know if they're completely sealed until they'll come out of the cooker. So I probably put about 2 or 3 inches of water in here. It's probably about 1/4 of the weight of the from the bottom, full of water. 7 jars. I'm going to put it on the stove. Turn the stove on high. I'm going to put the cover on it. And let it start heating up. Okay, I got the pressure cooker on the stove. I got it to about, like I say, it's a little bit more than 12 pounds of pressure. I believe it only has to be 10 for my altitude. But obviously, if you're in a different area besides Minnesota, you may want to look it up. Proper canning procedures and pressures and so forth and so on. I was thinking about it. I said 90 minutes as far as the time to pressure cook it, but it's actually 75, or 1 hour and 15 minutes. So looks like I got still about 1 hour and 8 minutes left to go. And in that time, I decided I was going to get it. I usually do this, but anyway, I get all the other jars ready to go. So. Fortunately, it looks like I may have enough to fill up 2 more batches, because 5 standard or regular sized jars, or 7 standard or regular sized jars will fit in the canner. But you can see that these are the wide mouth jars which I had to use, and I got 6 full, but I think that basically because you can see they're a little bit maybe wider than the standard jars, that I can only fit 6 in there. If I need to do anything to fill up that little bit of space, I might just put a pint jar with water in it. Obviously no cover, just basically just hold it from things from wobbling around in that space. But so when it reaches, first batch reaches, being in the pressure cooker for 75 minutes, I'll show you how to basically, take it out, and then I'll just start the next batch, and then I'll start a third batch. But obviously, 75 minutes per batch is hour and no, it's 2 hours and what am I thinking? It's 75, so it would be 2 hours and 30 minutes for 2 more batches. And so it'll be a little bit of time, and obviously I don't, nothing happens where it's got to heat up. I got to take the jars out, so probably be just, canning or finishing this off, and it'll probably take me the rest of this evening to do it. The first batch is ready to pull out, and like I say, I left it under pressure for 75 minutes or an hour and a quarter at least 12 pounds of pressure. Like I say, I can't control everything, but I think it's between 10 and 12 pounds of pressure. So I'm ready to pull out the jars now. So I got this handy dandy jar puller outer thing. I don't know what it's called exactly, but use that to basically get the jars out. What I'm going to do is basically pull them out of the pressure cooker and set them along the back of the stove and start to let them start cooling off. And all I'm going to do after that is repeat the process. Empty the water out of the pressure cooker, put the new jars in there, fill it up with water like I did before, and then I will heat up the stove again. So not actually 100% positive you can hear that noise, but there's some things that are actually going on after I take these out of the pressure cooker. One is you'll actually hear, there's a little bit of pressure. Maybe, one of these jars or a few may not seal, I'm not sure. But, like I say, first I'm going to take them off there.